But there was a moment, actually, ironically, in early 2020, I hit my 1-year anniversary at Chief. And I went for drinks with the CEO, Caroline Dell. It was February of 2020, one of the last, in real life moments before the pandemic. And she asked me a question that changed the trajectory of my career. And she said, so do you want to be a COO or a CEO one day? Because they're different. And I knew, instinctually in my gut that the answer was CEO. I wanted to lead and knew I had the capacity to lead in that way, and admired some of the very few female founders of startups who had grown their companies successfully. That would be my next moment after Chief.
Welcome to Inside the Round, where you get to learn about capital raising from founders who have just done it. I'm Helena Fogarty. I'm a fundraising expert who helps startups raise their seed and Series A rounds. And today I'm speaking with Caroline Dell of Goodword. Goodword is a networking co-pilot that helps professionals harness the power of their relationships. Built by connectors for connectors, Goodword integrates seamlessly across all the tools used for networking today and intelligently organizes your relationships. Goodword has recently raised $4 million in seed funding led by Human Ventures. So let's find out how they did it. Caroline, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to get talking about this because this is actually when I had Katie Dunn in here a couple weeks ago. I pitched her a bad version of Goodword, not even knowing exactly what you're building. It was just like, that's exactly what Goodword does. And so I was like, oh, that's amazing.
And she's one of our angel investors.
I know.
Go.
It's so good. So I'd love to hear more about your background story and how you moved from working in consulting to moving to startups.
Absolutely. It honestly was a happy accident. I was in my 3rd year at Bain, and I had the opportunity to do an externship. And like all great introductions, there was someone in my network who was working at Lola, at the time, a 3-person pre-seed stage tampon company. So imagine telling your family, hey, I'm going to temporarily leave Bain and go to this early stage startup that nobody has heard of. But I thought I had 6 months to try it out, and why not do something kind of risky with that time? Fast forward, and I fell in love with it. I found the pace, the energy, the impact. At Bain, we had always talked about results first, but in consulting, it takes months to years to see the results in a Fortune 500 organization. In startups, there was this feeling of, well, there's no one here to do it, and so I'll just do it. And then, immediately the next day, your customers feel that impact, or you see the business impact. So I found myself falling in love. And when after I finished my time at Bain, I went back and joined Lola full time.
Cool. How does an externship work? What is that?
It is a opportunity for consultants in their 3rd year to go and spend 6 months in industry. Often people do go to clients of Bain, but there's always a small, brave few of us who decide, to dip their toe in the startup world. And when I was at Bain back in 2015, that was the time when, Bainies had founded Warby Parker and Harry's and some of the great D2C companies of that era. So there was kind of a pipeline of folks going into startups. Those companies were were growth stage or late stage startups. And so I was one of a few who went to a pre-seed, truly early stage startup. But I found that building and operating was like the perfect place for me to land my skill set.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that Lola was that small.
It is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard. And now everyone knows the brand. But, when I went there, femtech wasn't even a category. We didn't have a word for it. And so it's, this fall marks 10 years of my operating career. It was the fall of 2015 when I went to Lola.
Yeah, very cool. And fast forward, you have now started Goodword. Did you always know you're going to start a company?
Hindsight's 2020, and when I look back, it seems obvious. But there was a moment, actually, ironically, in early 2020, I hit my 1-year anniversary at Chief. And I went for drinks with the CEO, Caroline Dell. It was February of 2020, one of the last, in real life moments before the pandemic. And she asked me a question that changed the trajectory of my career. And she said, so do you want to be a COO or a CEO one day? Because they're different. And I knew, like, instinctually in my gut that the answer was CEO, that I wanted to lead and knew I had the capacity to lead in that way, and admired some of the very few female founders of startups who had, grown their companies successfully, and that would be my next moment after chief. It didn't come for many years, but I did have that kind of clarity then.
And did you feel uncomfortable saying that to your boss?
No, I was really fortunate
Yeah.
actually, and I think, it helped inform my role at chief, so there were many times there was kind of a joke that I was, like, the wearer of all hats, and, there's an article that's infamous in startup world called "Give Away Your Legos," and I was, like, the poster child for this, where it's like, "Okay, I have these Legos that I'm just doing to try to set something up, and then I give them away, and then I go to the next problem, and I kinda lay the foundation, and then I pass that off," and so this role adapted to be sort of the strategic operator as opposed to, um, something that's more traditionally COO, where you're kind of always, like, operating and maintaining and iterating within a function,
Mhm.
and so it both helped know that what might come next, and it helped us shape my role at chief as we went from 200 members when I joined to 20,000 over the course of a few years.
Yeah, wow. And in terms of that answer, COO or CEO,
Mhm.
what informed that? Because like when I was little, I remember taking when I was probably a teenager, I took a some sort of personality test,
Mm.
and I was told I'd be a great CEO
Mm.
without any experience at that point. Was there any kind of other foreshadowing?
That's a great question. I wish there had been, something as obvious as a personality test or a job test is like, you're going to be an executive. Um, the reality is I think there are very few female executives. I mean, and even I think if we look at the Fortune 500, there are more people named John than there are female CEOs. So there's not a plethora of examples, but I did grow up in a household where um I was encouraged to be anything I wanted to be. My parents were both lawyers, but there were entrepreneurs in the extended parts of the family, and my dad had an entrepreneurial mindset. He had worked for a company and helped them IPO. He worked for various private companies throughout his career, and I think it was this idea of, maybe it was the first generation where there was not limits on what a woman could do or a person could do, and my parents were um, fortunate to obtain professional degrees, being among the first in their families to do that. And that gave me kind of the launch pad to say, you don't have to do X, Y, or Z. You can kind of do whatever you want to be or be whatever you want to be when you grow up. But it wasn't actually until I got into startup world that I really felt like I found my home.
And why did you start Goodword? Tell me how the idea came about.
Goodword started from the idea that relationships are everything. As professionals, I personally have experienced that all of those best moments or those best career changing moments have come from the right intro at the right time or the right person, saying, "Hey, have you thought about this?" or making that connection at the right time. And after 5 years of building Chief, I was truly inspired by what we saw in terms of the impact that a network can have for a professional. At the same time, networks are really hard to manage, and there have been many companies over the past 2 decades who have tried to create something for consumers to help them manage their networks, and at the end of the day, consumers don't really want to sit there and tag every single person they know or, put if folks listening are in sales roles or B2B roles, they know it is not delightful to put data into a CRM. And so there's so much context about relationships, and what makes them special is that personal context. And it felt like that was what was missing, a product to really help people cultivate and activate their relationships in an authentic and purposeful way.
Yeah, and I think I've spoke about this before, but when I was working at an agency, as a client contact, it informed and helped me become a better family member.
Mm.
Because I had, like, a grandfather who was very grouchy because no one called him, and
Oh.
because I was
Mhm.
calling my clients once a week or twice a week for a check-in, I just scheduled that with my grandfather as well, but I feel like I wasn't necessarily raised with, a kind of best practices
Mhm.
in developing relationships,
Mhm.
making them deeper and useful, but not necessarily useful, but authentic, right?
Yeah.
And, when I signed up for Goodword, I think last week, it's very cool. It's like, "Oh, here are some things you should do,"
Mhm.
which is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I think very few people, right, were maybe
Mhm.
fortunate to grow up with that relationship mindset, right? It's there's a group of, I'll call them super connectors, who just it's almost like they have a photographic memory for remembering those little
Mhm.
details. Oh, their daughter is starting college, and those things that make us human.
Yeah.
But for most of us, it gets lost in the noise. And as we have become more digitally connected, I mean, if you look at the folks on our wait list, they have on average about 5,000 LinkedIn connections.
Mhm.
The brain doesn't remember details, let alone, names and faces and where you even met someone for 5,000 people. So I don't think it's the limitation is not the desire for connection. The limitation is just our brain's storage and memory
Mhm.
is at capacity.
Yeah, and I think when we looked at LinkedIn, like, LinkedIn is a wonderful tool for many things, but it's not great for understanding the quality of relationships, the depth of relationships, um,
Mhm.
and by the way, like, my closest relationships, I don't even know if I'm connected to them on LinkedIn.
You may not be.
I
Why
have
would you
I have
be?
my them in my phone, right?
Sure.
Like, yeah.
Sure. And so that is one thing that
Mhm.
Goodword does do is we pull in your LinkedIn connections, but also the user can decide whether they want to pull in their iPhone
Yeah.
contacts and then also integrate their calendar, because that is, the truth is different relationships take place on different platforms, and today that creates some of this issue of like it's all scattered.
Yeah, absolutely, I love that. Um, Tell me a little bit about how you validated the idea
Mm.
and while you were getting started, how you decided that this was really a meaty idea that made sense.
I put my consulting hat back on.
Mhm.
And I actually went out and did about 100 plus customer interviews.
Yeah.
So I spoke to different demographics, different age ranges, different job types, and just got curious about how people were managing their relationships today. It was honestly wild, the hacky solutions we saw from, a lot of people texting themselves or taking notes in an iPhone app, and then we'd say, "Well, do you ever go back to that note?" And they're like, "No, never." It's there. Calendar reminders is quite common. Like you said, scheduling time to check in on someone. I think our favorite was one person we interviewed had their entire apartment wall covered in Post-it notes. Um, and this is a prolific angel investor, runs, many, many deals off this
Yeah.
this relationship system. But mostly what we heard is people were like, "I don't have a system, and I wish I did," because there's just so much friction and so much effort that goes in that people kind of just give up. And then those opportunities, they're often lost because you don't see the opportunities that are there.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did you find your co-founder? Tell me a little bit about that.
So when I met my co-founder, it was again an example of the power of my network. And I had been co-founder dating. I tried a lot of things, right? I tried um YC co-founder dating, which there's a lot of people on it, but hard to kind of sort through all the people on it. I reached into my own network and engineers and technical people I had worked with in the past. And one day, I got a email forwarded to my inbox, and it said, "Heard great things about Chris. You should meet." And I took one look at the email and the LinkedIn that was attached and said, "This person is incredibly talented and was super excited to meet Chris and explore co-founding. And what's amazing is that it was Kat Middleton again who made that introduction, because Chris had worked at a primary backed company. And so, different years, different times in our careers, but we were both within the broader portfolio. And Chris and I met. I think one half of it was the right introduction at the right time. And then the second piece of it was really being intentional about making the decision on both of our sides.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this knowledge, but also feeling that like this is going to be the most important decision I ever make
Yeah.
for the company. So Chris was like a great partner from day one, and like really down for anything. And he did a full day of executive coaching with me. He did first round reviews, 50 first questions, where we wrote out like
So good.
all of the things. What's your vision, what's your motivation, why start a company. And we spent about 3 months working together almost full time, just seeing what it would be like to partner. And after that, it was really, really clear to both of us that we were the right duo to tackle this problem.
That's amazing. So did you have a period of time, a defined period of time, you're like, let's check in on March 1st and see if this is working for both of us? Or was it more undefined?
It was more undefined, honestly. It was a little more organic. We met in March. I remember we had lunch in Flatiron, and then we just started working together a little bit here and there. And then, we started working together more because we were both enjoying it. And then I think it was May where we said like, look, let's try it. Let's like really try it. And I mean, I think it was only about 30 days into that kind of more full-time working together that it became really clear for both of us. And I think it's fair to people to say like we can't try it forever, right? I mean, ultimately, like the big company needed the right set of leaders, and we're just fortunate that through that trial period, we both agreed that it was a good fit.
Yeah, that's very cool. So were you employee number 3 at Lola, or
I was, yes,
and then employee number 5
at Chief. Yes, I was.
Amazing.
I was, yes. I have a lot of admiration and respect for people who join. It's not just, of course, it's founders, but it's like the founding team. And I've seen, how those first 10 employees at a company really shape so much. I mean, the culture, the energy, the direction, and then they do a lot of the hiring, right? So then they bring in, I think at one point at Chief, I had hired about a third of the entire company.
Yeah.
And so, right now we're a team of 5, and I know that the next couple of folks that we hire are going to have a huge impact.
Yeah, that's amazing. So tell me a little bit about what it's like to move from early employee to being the boss. Moving into the CEO role. What's the difference there? Because I think a lot of people, when I've been early, have thought, oh yeah, I can run this place.
Of course.
With a certain level of arrogance, right?
Yes.
So when you actually step in and start something, tell me what the difference is.
It's funny because I felt like I had the best possible training wheels. I was in chief of staff roles, I was in a GM role, I was in an undefined jack of all trades role. And it was when I departed Chief, I asked the then CEO, Caroline, I said, so like real talk, like how different is it really? I was your right hand. What should I expect moving into the founder CEO role? And she looked at me and she said, it is really different. and you can't know, you can't really experience it until you experience it. I feel like there must be an analogy here of like training for the Olympics and then walking into the stadium and like hearing the noise in the crowd, and it's just a different like bodily sensation. And so I've tried to think about why. The thing that seems to make sense to people is like, look, I am responsible for people's livelihoods, for their salaries, and they might be the sole income earner in the family. We're responsible for their health insurance. Some of our team members have little kids. And so that's a ton of responsibility. It's also, our investors, like all the people we took capital from, some of whom are close friends and family. And so there's a real feeling of, at the end of the day, I'm carrying the weight on my shoulders, and at the end of the day, I am the decision maker for this business. And so in those moments when it gets hard, I try to just remind myself, just get more right than wrong, right? Like, you don't have to get 100% right. You just have to get more right than wrong.
Yeah, and often making a decision is the right decision.
Yes.
Because you can usually undo a decision after you gather more data, but I think a fault that I see is just staying in the indecision space. It's a problem for startup CEOs, startup founders, but also for people in general.
Yeah.
Just staying in that indecisive space doesn't allow you to work through gathering more data and moving forward.
The two-way door or the one-way door. I learned that few years ago, and it's something I try to remember. Is this decision a two-way door? Meaning if we walk through it, we could always come back.
Yeah.
And if it is a two-way door, just make it and go, because you will learn. And if it's a one-way door, that's when you have to. And there are very few things that are truly one-way doors. But I think getting comfortable making decisions, knowing who you have around you that you can call. I mean, I have people I've worked with in my career. I have, of course, my formal investors, my formal advisors, but just people who are excellent at what they do, who I can call and ask, to be an informal board of advisors. That power of the network that I built over the last 10 years as a startup operator, it's definitely an incredible asset now when I am in the decision maker seat.
Yeah. There's one thing I wanted to say about moving from an employee to the boss. And I would imagine that there's a lot that seemed high stakes as an employee, but it's kind of theoretical. And then when you are the person out there who's raising the money, who started this idea, who is hiring, like, it's all very real and it becomes very personal. Because part of the reason why people invested was you. A big part.
Yes. And I think the earlier stage you are, the more personal it can feel, because there's fewer metrics to point to. Like, it's not about the numbers, it's about the vision. Of course, the market opportunity, but also, is it the right team? And often the team means, is it the right set of founders to solve the problem? I know we'll chat about fundraising, but that was maybe one of the things I had to learn to get over almost really quickly, that the no, as personal as it feels, to just say, like, it's not personal. It's, it is my, life's work. It is my name and reputation on the line, but it is not a personal judgment. And there are many reasons why an investor might choose to invest or might choose to pass.
Yeah.
But I think that's definitely an adjustment from being an employee to being a founder.
Before we jump into fundraising, I just want to go back to how did you know when it was time to start your own company and start Goodword specifically?
I don't know if there's ever a perfect time, but I think it's always better today than tomorrow. To be honest, I think I probably was ready before Chief was ready for me to move on. I mean, I knew, like I said, in 2020, that founding a company was something that was really interesting to me to pursue in my next chapter. But from 2020 through 2022, Chief grew like a rocket ship. And it was not and wouldn't have been the right time to depart the business. And so it wasn't until 2023 when I was leading a new vertical, exploring different market opportunities with a small team in a GM role. And some things changed in the business. And, I give a lot of credit to the founders of Chief, who said, hey, you always have a job here. You've done enormous things for this business. But frankly, you're ready. And like they almost sort of, it was like a bird getting kicked out of
That's
the nest.
amazing.
It was
Yeah,
like
that's cool.
you're free. You're free to go. It did take me another couple of months, even after that, to work up the, part courage, part commitment to the idea, to start doing some of that research and deep thinking. But I also thought about it on the personal side. I had been married in 2022. It was about a year later that I left Chief. I'm in my 30s, and I had a conversation with my husband of like, hey, if I don't do this now and knowing that we want a family someday, it's only going to get harder to do it all at the same time. And so it felt like there was a moment both in my professional life and in my personal life that said, like, now is the time. And there's never a perfect time, but when the opportunity came, I had to take it.
Yeah. So how did you know this was going to be VC backable?
I always knew it would be VC backable. I think that's a decision founders should make up front.
Yeah.
That's not to say there aren't some businesses where you could probably start it and get to a certain point and then take one of two roads. And there's this concept now of seed strapping, like people raising a seed and then, getting to profitability and deciding not to continue on the venture path. But I do think you need to be intentional about, is the market that we're even tackling big enough to warrant a venture-backed opportunity? And for us, it's clear that it absolutely is. I mean, LinkedIn is a $16 billion a year company. And it's one of the only, professional products or tools that people use for networking. And so, also when you look at how many professionals have more than about 1,000 to 1,500 LinkedIn connections, because that, if you've ever studied human psychology, Robin Dunbar is famous for the theory that you can only have about 150 friends. It's off that goes out in rings. So it's 150 friends, 500 acquaintances, right? People you say hi to in the hallway, you recognize them, your barista. But then there's like about 1,500 names to faces that your brain can even recognize. And like it or not, celebrities, politicians, they're in there too. And so if you've ever had the moment where like you get an email from someone or, you run into someone at an event and they're like, hey, how you been? And you kind of deer in the headlights for a moment. You're like, God, I know you, but I can't picture where.
Yeah.
That's a very common phenomenon because we have more connections than the brain can remember. So, and there's about, there's millions, there's hundreds of millions of professionals who have, more than 1,000 digital connections. And so we knew the opportunity was really big.
Yeah, that's amazing. That happens to me all the time, by the way. And I'm not so great at remembering people's names and faces, and I always introduce myself.
Which at least is better than, being like, hey, like just trying to take, one time I tried to take a guess and my guess was wrong. And I learned it. I nailed down to say, I'm Caroline, the CEO and co-founder of Goodword. And that's hard too when you start to become a little more public because people recognize you and you might not recognize them. And so there's definitely, I try to be graceful about like the reintroduction. Don't assume someone remembers me.
Yeah.
But, hopefully we can make this problem a little bit easier.
Yeah. I live in a small town in New York City now, and people get offended when I reintroduce myself. I'm like, please help me. I don't remember your name.
Yes.
I'm just awkward about it.
But we should, but human empathy is a very powerful thing, and recognizing that once you're past 500, we're just really overloaded, and it's not intended to be, a personal, affront. And so one thing that I do think people are excited about with Goodword is the idea of integrating a calendar and then saying, it's like, oh, you spoke with this person 6 months ago. They mentioned they were going on vacation to Greece and, then their kid was starting college in the fall. And you're like, beautiful. Like, let's get on a call and not just say like, oh, how's the weather? What did you do last weekend? It's like the relationship building is where the real like human connection comes
Yeah.
into play.
It's like having your own personal assistant sitting right next to you, like in Devil Wears Prada, being like, "Oh, this is so and so, and his
Yeah,
life is so and so."
exactly. I
Yeah,
love that scene where
and
she
these,
kind of whispers in her
yes,
ear, or you think about the president and
yes,
how you've got the earpiece in and it's just like a little whisper of you just it's just a buddy.
yeah, exactly. Um, you'll have to incorporate it into the friend wearable that we're seeing
You know,
advertised everywhere.
yeah, that's gonna be really interesting to see how that shakes out
Yeah.
because I do one thing I don't believe in is that AI becoming your friend instead of humans.
Mhm.
I don't think real human connection is replaceable. But I do think what's really interesting about the world we're living in now is we have a tool, we have a technology to process the reams and reams and reams of language, and language is how human relationships are communicated. And so, um, we view it at Goodword as more of AI as the technology that unlocks the ability to do this, but we still believe in keeping the human at the center. It's like the behind the scenes, chief of staff or, someone whispering in your ear, but it is not kind of getting in between you and the human that you want to have a relationship with.
Yeah, and I agree with this, and this is something I think about a lot as someone who's a coach, and
Mm.
I love using Claude and I love using ChatGPT, and I know that there's stats that people are using these for therapy and whatnot, but
Mhm.
I'll tell you with some of my coaching clients, literally sometimes connecting with me is bringing them back to their humanity
Mhm.
and giving them space,
Mhm.
and you don't get that from, talking to AI right now. I'll just say right now. But
Yeah.
it's, literally sometimes it's just that absolutely human
Mhm.
connection that's going to help people.
I had the great fortune to meet Esther Perel a
Mhm.
few years ago, and
Yeah.
one of the things she said to me in our brief conversation was, um, when you're on a Zoom screen, the human brain actually doesn't interpret it as making eye contact.
Wow.
And so because of that, there's always a barrier. There's
Mhm.
always that we can't cross. Um, and it's just that act of making eye contact
Mhm.
that chemically connects you to someone else.
Yeah.
And so I do think that is something that we need to be intentional about with AI is like, where are those moments where it's great for democratizing knowledge? I know
Mm.
I'm so glad I don't have to continue to memorize my Excel formulas from my Bain training. That has been solved, and that's the right thing to solve with technology. But it can't replace the intimacy of human relationships.
Yeah, which I think is critical for us as humans. Like it's just literally part of us.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we've probably read a lot about the loneliness
Mhm.
epidemic, and it's interesting. Sometimes folks don't always associate good word with that problem because when you think loneliness, you often might think friends or family or like really really intimate relationships, and of course that is true. There's personal relationships are absolutely critical to your quality of life.
Mhm.
But interestingly, we spend most of our waking hours for at least for our customers, for you know professionals,
Mhm.
they spend more waking hours at work than anywhere else. And so what would a world look like if they actually felt like true connection and relationship to their colleagues? I mean, that's been one of the joys of my startup career, both at Lola and Chief, working with so many women in their 20s, 30s, 40s who are trying to make the world a better place for women. Um, sharing that camaraderie and now that I've departed some of those places, knowing those are people that I don't want to lose
Mhm.
touch with after many, many years of building something together and seeing them every single day and developing not only like collegial relationships but friendships.
Yeah. That's great. So you've mentioned Primary Ventures,
Mhm.
which was an investor in Lola and in Chief.
They were an investor in Chief, not
Okay,
in
Chief.
Lola.
But I want to talk about your fundraising process
Mhm.
and how you even entered this, right? You've seen it from not afar, but you've been supporting the process in the past,
Mhm.
and now you've got to raise your own round.
Mhm.
So tell me, did you have like a good network of investors?
Yes, I did. I had a strong network of investors. And when I look at my cap table, most of the people who ended up investing in Goodword in this round, I didn't know personally before, but someone I knew them. So they were like the one introduction away.
Yeah.
Um, I was fortunate to get some behind the scenes exposure to fundraising while at Lola and Chief. So I was there when Lola raised our seed, our A, and our B, and then for Chief, the A and the B,
Hmm.
um, which for Chief's B, it was $100 million round. So I've seen, very small to pretty large growth
Yeah.
rounds. Um, but my work was always behind the scenes. So I would, make the deck, help with the data room, pull numbers together, FAQs, and again, there's a little bit of, "Oh, I've seen it. I know how fundraising goes." But when you are the founder, your work is really the relationships you're developing with the investors more so than the pitch deck or the data room. Of course, you need to have those things. But that part was the new part to me because this was actually our first institutional round at Goodword.
Yeah. So tell me, how did you get started?
Like all great things through my network.
Yeah.
So when I left Chief, I called up a couple of friends who were in VC. And one of the best intros I ever received was from my friend and former colleague. We started our careers at Bain together. He went on to found a fund in healthcare. So obviously not a fit for what I was building. But I called him and said, Grenade, who are some of the best investors you know? And knowing great people know great people, he responded and said, Heather Harnett from Human Ventures. And this was in 2023. And made the introduction to Heather. And Heather kindly put me on some of her event guest lists. They host a number of events, often bringing together women for things like poker night or women's health luncheon, you know, founders, investors, reporters, like just creating an ecosystem really of people in New York City. And it was a full year of getting to know each other, going to events, meeting folks in the portfolio. And then when I was time to raise our round, it was a very obvious first call to call Human Ventures and let them know we would be kicking off a
Yeah.
process.
By the way, I've been stalking Human Ventures, like not actively, but I've been seeing what they've been doing for a very long time because of their thesis, what Heather does. I think Esther Perel is
Mm-hmm.
part of their
She is.
board or in some function. I'm not sure what it is, but I love. I'm not sure if this is still their thesis, but I love the idea that they incorporate support for founders in terms of coaching, in terms of maybe therapy. I don't know if that's still actively, but like I was so impressed by that when I read that.
We haven't done it yet, but I would take therapy from Esther Perel any day if it were available. Yeah. No, but joking aside, they do a lot for their portfolio. I mean, our launch party that we hosted on October 30th was at Human Ventures' office. I mean, it's rare that you have an investor who is, mission aligned, vision aligned,
Yeah.
leads around, and throws a party for you at their office. So it was a natural fit. But to your original question, I mean, there were a lot of people who were on my list who I gave a heads up. I was at Lola and Chief, and you had invested in those companies. And um I do think it helped to get a lot of conversations, the fact that I had already known people. But what helped most was sitting down, making a list of all the funds who, invest in this type of industry, idea, space. And then what I did, and everyone does it, fund and check size and fund size and location and those types of things you can find on Crunchbase or PitchBook. But we had this whole other section that was relationship
Hmm.
story. And so we said, what is the relationship strength that I had, that my co-founder had? When was like our most recent interaction? And we ended up with a column called like Friends of Goodword. And we said, there are people who maybe they don't invest in our space, but they're in venture and they are friends and they can make introductions for us. And so we really thought about it as who are the web of connections we had who are potential investors themselves or could make the right introduction for us.
And so if it's okay, I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into that.
Mhm.
When you identified these friends of Goodword,
Mhm.
what'd you do with that? Did you then set up time to meet with those people and let them know what was going on and what you're planning to do?
Some of them. And so when I first decided and committed to founding, I started a quarterly update and to about 500 or 600 people. I mean, it was a pretty good list of
Nice.
people. And so I was updating folks quarterly, and so it wasn't a surprise, I think, to many when it's like, hey, I incorporated this is the problem we're solving. Hey, I brought on a co-founder. Hey, we're going out for our first fundraise. And so bringing them along on the journey,
Yeah.
just allowed people to help more than being like, hey, you haven't heard from me in 3 years, but here I am. So some of them, yes. I mean, I set up time, for example, to meet with Jordana, one of the Lola co-founders, who I hadn't seen in a number of years, partially because of the pandemic and all that. And then, I think a practice that a lot of founders have is they take their entire list and they just sort of send it around their network. That's a pretty big ask to ask somebody to sit there and go line by line by line by line. Like, do I know this fund? And it's not easy, if you have this list of funds, you have to potentially go on your own LinkedIn and say, okay, A16Z, who do I know at A16Z? Who could I, and so I think, when you do that, you're hoping to get lucky. And you're just hoping people are like, yeah, I'll sit down for 20 minutes and, kind of help you.
Right.
What I found worked really well is kind of flipping it, inverting it, and going to starting with all my founder friends and saying, who are your investors? Well, one, sometimes I would look up their companies and look at who their investors are. And if I saw, who their investors were, I could say, I see one of your investors is X fund. Would you be willing to make an introduction to that fund? And so I just made the ask a lot easier for them. And I also, and more specific. And the other thing is that some of the best intros come from founders in the portfolio.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like there's getting an intro and then there's getting the best intro, right? And so I think starting with founders saying, learning who their investors are, who are the investors who you would recommend on your cap table, and then asking for those introductions. Those are super, super warm. We did ask our friends in venture if they did not work or invest in a space that was our space. Our friends in biotech or healthcare, they made great introductions. I think one easy mistake that sometimes make is asking their investor friends for introductions when the investor could invest in your company. And so that sends a bit of an odd signal to the market of like, well, but why aren't you investing?
Right.
But I do think, you can start with the list. There are people you can send the whole list to, and they will sit down and they will, put their name next to every fund they could make an intro to. But I think the more legwork you do for folks, the easier you make it on them, and the more like you are to come up with, again, not just an intro, but the right intro.
Yeah, and that's great. I also try to tell my clients, I do tell my clients that we have to allow people to be busy, to have other things going on, for people to be raising themselves so they can't make an intro at that point. So I tell people to look for redundancy as well. So if you're reaching out to a founder friend of yours who happens to be raising, they may say, I can't do it right now. So how else can we get to that investor?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Multiple. I mean, that's that's a sales trick, multi-threading too, to, if you're in sales, it's like you might try to get an intro to the CRO and the CMO. You go in different ways. It's similar at a fund. There's lots of people at a fund. You could have one founder who they have this partner on their board. You could have someone on your team who went to business school with one of the associates. Like there's lots of different pathways. And, frankly, that's something we want to build with Goodword, which is, managing your own network and then finding those really warm introductions from within your network. But like a funny story was one of our investors, Graham and Walker, we weren't actually connected to.
Who I've also been stalking. Yes.
They are great. Yes. Leslie is an awesome female solo GP. And we got introduced to her about 15 days before our round was supposed to close.
Wow.
Turns out that Lindsay Kaplan, one of the chief co-founders, is a small LP in Graham and Walker. I didn't know that. And it just, was one of those like, oh my goodness, like I can't believe this introduction wasn't made, sooner moments when it finally was, when we all did connect the dots. And I think that's just a good example of like, even though Lindsay had made other introductions for us, even though she had personally invested, even though she had invested through Next Wave NYC, Flybridge's Scout Fund, she knew we were raising. She's busy. She's doing 100 things. She's, investing, talking to hundreds of companies to potentially invest. And this idea of, just like exhaust all possible paths, because when that right, connection happens, you're like, oh my goodness, of course we finally got here. But sometimes it's like not through the front door, it's like through a side door.
Yeah, that's great though. That's wonderful. It's always good to hear great things about these people. I've been like, ooh, that looks like an interesting person.
Yes.
Right? It's wonderful to hear. Yeah, that's fantastic. So what was your biggest challenge during the raise?
I think there were two things. One, like we talked about earlier, it not taking the no's really personally. Again, I was our first round of institutional capital. We were pre-product launch, pre-revenue.
Yeah.
So there weren't numbers to look. I mean, we could talk about TAM, so we could talk about like the opportunity, the size of the opportunity, but we couldn't say like these are our metrics as a company. And so it did feel like people were saying like, am I excited about this space? And am I excited about the team? Like, is this the right team to is there fit? And a lot of people were like, oh, you guys have great founder market fit. And it was very clear, between my experience building communities and operating, and then Chris's experience building products and technology. We came together with 30 plus years of combined startup operating experience. So we were an interesting team. We didn't have a hard time getting people to take a first call. We did have, interestingly, the challenge of people pattern matching and saying, well, personal CRMs is like, it's a tar pit, it's a graveyard. It's, that YC term of like, everyone's tried it, no one's figured it out. Like, why is it different? And even a year ago, the narrative around AI and what AI could do for consumer applications wasn't where it was today. But in the middle of our fundraise, NFX published a piece called Consumer is Back. And that was a moment where, yes, we're like, yes, and like nobody sees it. Some people are starting to see it. And so just sometimes you don't get lucky with those macro themes, and sometimes you do get lucky with the macro themes. And I think that shift towards recognizing a new technology could help us solve these unsolved problems. And so that was definitely one of them. I think the other challenge was our lead, because of the fund size, because of their check size, they were targeting about somewhere between 30 and 50% allocation of the round. When we compared to benchmarks, when people talk about a lead, usually it's like 50, 60% plus. Yeah. And so there's stories of, a lead committed, they signed a term sheet, and everything else just sort of fell into place
Yeah.
because I mean, maybe there's only a very little bit of allocation left. And that's becoming more and more common, actually, leads wanting to take a bigger and bigger percentage of the round. And so most founders, I think, have to climb this enormous hill of like, find the lead, find the lead, find the lead. And then it all, kind of falls. For us, we were actually open to a co-lead. We were like exploring different structures. And in some ways, having the space for a co-lead was like a great opportunity because we got to bring in some more funds and some smaller funds. But it also meant that like even after we had our signed term sheet, we had our, lead slash co-lead, we still had 60% of the round to fill out. And so it wasn't like, it's just all the way done. We had to continue to have those conversations. And thankfully, Human very much understood that like they were the anchor and the lead, but there was, an additional capital commitment that we needed to continue the process and needed to continue having lots of conversations.
Yeah. And in that situation, does Human, or I don't know, I don't want to, I guess I'm fixating on them, but do they open doors and connect you with people who could potentially fill that out?
They do.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
they do.
Yeah.
And that is great. And once you do have investors committed, obviously they want you to fill out the rest of your round. And so Human made introductions for us, and then Jen at January Ventures in particular was someone we just sent our spreadsheet to, and it immediately came back with like, we can make intros to this fund, to this fund, to this fund. And a lot of them have, co-invested together before. So that's a great question too, once you do have a couple, either a lead or even sometimes it happens the other way around.
Yeah.
Where you have a couple of smaller funds and they're saying, I want to invest, but I'm not going to set the terms. And so, call me when you have a lead. And then you can say, well, like, look, who have you participated in prior rounds with, what funds have led rounds you've participated in. And so I think that's, like an unspoken secret is like all the investors know each other. Of course they do. They're on cap tables together. So, once they're committed, you can ask them for intros.
And for you, you were so early in terms of the company, right? You're pre-revenue, but Human Ventures usually leads at seed. So how did that happen?
Well, I'm pleased to say we're no longer pre-revenue, but at the time we were. And it's a great question. We had always went into it with like, we've got plan A, B, and C. And we did the bottoms up math of what do we truly think it will take to build this. And so for founders, that's actually a step I would say, do it in prep, because you're going to get asked eventually, what will this capital go to? And you want to say more than like team and product and marketing. It's like really, truly, what is it going to take to build the product, get it into market, and get those early signs of traction? And because of the product we're building, it requires so much personal, intimate data. It wasn't something we could just kind of vibe code into existence. And I do think there are products where, $1 to $2 million, you can get it into market and get that signal. But for us, there was more R&D that needed to be spent up front. And so we went into the raise with a very clear why of why we were raising what we were raising and what we were going to do with that capital.
Yeah.
I think, that was part of it. And the other part of it, we were fortunate to find an investor who was extremely mission aligned and values aligned and believes that in the AI era, human relationships are more important than ever before. And so while everyone's sort of building to replace, or disintermediate humans with, your AI buddy, there's going to be kickback to that. And there's going to actually be this opportunity to do something contrarian and to think about it differently. And so it was both the, knowing our strategy and then finding a partner who understood and believed in that strategy and vision.
Yeah. And when you were going into these conversations, Did you have a wait list at that point? Did you have like what when people were asking, maybe when people were thinking it's too early,
Mhm.
were you pointing to the hundreds of conversations? Like what could you say in terms of knowledge about this problem that got people from it's too early to I'm in?
We pointed to the hundreds of research conversations, yes. We also pointed to our backgrounds as operators and the founder market fit that we had to this problem in particular.
Yeah.
We didn't have a wait list at the time. It was again, we hadn't launched we hadn't come out of stealth even with the concept. Like if you had looked at my LinkedIn or public presence then, it would have said, like co-founder stealth.
Mhm.
And
Which is its own strategy.
which is its own
Yeah.
strategy. And the investors did reach out and they're like, "What are you building?" And so I do think there's a time to be in stealth, and then I do think it gives you the opportunity. I mean, we had a big moment in June during New York City Tech Week where we came out of stealth and
Yeah.
we announced what we were building and why, and we actually threw a party at Chief in Flatiron as part of New York Tech Week and brought together panelists who are super connectors in the New York City ecosystem. So we were able to um, make a great moment out of that first, who this is who we are,
Mhm.
and then have a subsequent, more product market launch in October. So we're creating these kind of moments that our communities and networks can like be part of along the way.
Yeah, wonderful. How has your leadership style changed from being an early employee, not the big boss, but a boss, to being the founder and CEO of your own company?
In some ways, it is fairly similar.
Mhm.
And in some ways, I feel like I'm learning a different element of leadership. So it's funny when we launched a few weeks ago, Lindsay Kaplan, she posted about Goodword and she wrote about why she invested. And one of the things she said, having seen me as an operator for many, many years, is we were an easy team to invest in because I was part firefighter, part mayor, always calm in chaos. And when I read it, I went, "That's totally true." And it really meant a lot that she, you know, could see my leadership style. And so those things are the same. How I show up as an operator, my truly insane calendar blocking where I like will sit down and focus on something for 90 minutes and like deep think or like will roll up my sleeves and solve whatever needs to be solved in the business. Those are all true.
Mhm.
I think the part that is an evolution from operator or team leader to company leader is it is a much more external facing job.
Mhm.
And there's a lot more storytelling. Like you need to tell people why do you exist in the world? Why should they care? How can they be part of it and sort of engage, you know, um, investors, vendors, partners, like not of course your team. You're always talking to your team, but like who are your communities around you that could support and might want to support if they can be kind of brought along on the journey.
Yeah, wonderful. So what has changed since you closed your round?
Well, we launched a product, and we opened up Founding Connector memberships for the very first time. We also, I mean, in order to get there, when we closed around, it was myself, my co-founder Chris, and a handful of contractors who had followed us, had followed either myself or Chris from prior companies, which is maybe one of the most incredible things as a leader to
Yeah.
see people kind of opting to work for you again and again.
It's really nice.
It is. It
Yeah.
really is meaningful to me. So we were able to actually extend some of those folks full-time offers.
Mhm.
And then we were able to bring on a couple of other folks. We brought on Alex Chung as our head of growth, brought on a product designer, another engineer. And so, like I said, we're still a very small team.
Yeah.
But it is nice when you go from feeling like you're talking to yourself all day or just you and your co-founder locked in a tiny room to like having an office and a team.
Yeah.
But I think, we put after the round closed, we put our heads down and we said, we have to get this product into market as fast as we can but we have to get it to like our minimum standards. So, like, what is our MVP, and how do we like, what is our go-to-market strategy? And so that's what we spent most of the spring and summer working on. We did achieve that in the fall, just a few weeks ago. And now we're learning from our earliest founding connectors, thinking about how to continue to iterate and evolve the product, and then how we expand upon that in the coming year.
Yeah, very cool. I think that there's some key moments when you're a founder. There's that beginning where you're pushing everything, like you're doing all the outreach, nothing's coming back. You feel like you're literally speaking to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden people start responding. You're like, oh my God, now I'm overwhelmed. And then maybe that's not you. Maybe that was just me. But then there's also the time when only the people you know
Mm-hmm.
are using what you've created.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden other people are using it. It's amazing.
We sent an email to our wait list a few days before our launch to let them know, hey, the product, it's coming. Thank you for signing up early and being here early, and it is coming soon. And we are going to be rolling it out slowly. Like, it's not, don't everyone expect to get it on day one. Like, we just want to let you know what's happening. And if you're really interested, reply and let us know.
Mm.
And over 500 people responded, which I was floored. Not only did they read the email, but they responded to the email. And what was really interesting was when we went through the list of 500 people, we said we should give them early access. I thought I would know most of them. I thought they'd like all be my friends. I only knew like 40 or 50 people on the list.
Yes.
And that was
pretty awesome.
That was pretty cool. I'm like,
Yeah.
like, this is a real problem with a real need. And it's not just when you move from that, like, your friends are like, how's your startup going, Caroline? Like, they kind of wondering if it's like ever gonna get off the ground, to total strangers raising their hand and asking to be part of something. That's I think a really cool moment when like, and it doesn't mean that you have all the answers or that the solution is 100% there yet, but like, you're solving the right problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've been talking about it for so long. And then all of a sudden you have confirmation that what you've been saying is true, even though you believed it. It just helps.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. So do you have any advice for founders who are early stage and are planning to raise?
Yes. I have two pieces of advice specifically for fundraising. One, don't skip the prep. I mean, it's so easy to just throw yourself into fundraising, but it probably, I think the preparation is what helps lead to a great outcome. And once you start, you can just end up in like back-to-back meetings all day, every day. Hopefully, right? Hopefully there's a lot of interest, but that you don't have time to like go back and change your deck, or, just think about how much why are you raising what you're raising? And so I think that preparation, make your list, make your deck, make your data room in advance, make a list of all the people you could ask for intros, and like really get all of that ready, then hit go. And even actually before you hit go, call some of the people who you really would like, think about who your first calls should be, and give them a heads up, like truly, like be like, we're gonna go, and if you want an early look, like, let's chat in 10 days.
Yeah.
So I think that preparation is not to be skipped. The other thing is, and a lot of credit to my husband, who is in enterprise sales, when we hit those moments of oh my God, we're running out of funds, like, the round is only half full, like, what are we gonna do? He said to me a number of times, pipeline cures all. And it is so true that, I think unlike most of the, the games we've played in life, where like you have to get an A or like, gold star, or like you need 95%, it's like the total inverse, where it's like it only takes one or two funds, but you have to talk to hundreds And that is a mistake I see people make is they talk to 30 or 40 or 50 funds and then they get discouraged because it's discouraging.
Yes, yes.
It truly is. But I think if you just go in, you say, I'm going to talk to 100 to 200 funds, and I'm not going to stop until I do that because there's so many. I mean, and in the last 5 years, VC has really grown, and we all know the big names, but there's so many smaller funds that might be thesis aligned, mission aligned, or willing to take a bet that maybe some of the bigger consensus driven funds are not willing to make right now because there's a lot of money going into certain categories and not into others. So that was the thing. I actually got really great advice from a former chief member, Alex Satine, who has a fractional CFO business. And she sent me a note kind of mid-process. Can't even remember when. It's all a blur. But she just said, "You're doing great. Keep going." And I wrote "keep going" on my whiteboard in my bedroom because I'm a founder living in New York City. So my desk was in my bedroom. But I would wake up and see this just keep going. And that became sort of the mantra of it. It's like, don't worry about the no. There's 5 more funds to talk to, and you'll find the right ones. You just have to talk to a lot. So I think that's the thing I would say, like, don't stop, don't quit, until, of course, like, if you truly exhausted all options, maybe you do have to take a step back and say, what's our plan B or plan C, and are there alternative forms of capital we could raise? But there's a lot there are a lot of funds out there. Your network can get you to a lot of them. So get the intros, talk to hundreds before decide that it's time to pause. I think that's really it. Just keep going.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that you're talking about is having the right amount of outreach, having the right amount of conversation gives you optionality. Because even some founders who have been a second time founder exited, they may have a list that only has 20 to 30 people, and then they realize that they're not finding the right people. And you've got to right size it because you don't want to be betting on one person that you think might be the lead and have that not happen.
I mean, we talked to a fund who we were really excited about, and we got maybe 4 or 5 conversations in. It was right before the holidays.
Yeah.
And we were like, this is great. It's gonna work.
Yeah.
2 female GPs, they were great fit. And then they were honest and they said, look, like this is the last check of our fund. There was no way funds to get the last check of a fund is like nearly impossible. Like, you're not only competing with who's raising now, but like any company in any industry raising over the next 6 months, they might want to sit on that check for that.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's not you, it's not anything you've done. It's just, it could be the fund, it could be the market. And so that's the other thing is, like, do create some time and some space because like I said with Leslie and Graham and Walker, that introduction came 15 days before our round was slated to close. We did end up doing an initial close and a second close so that they could participate in the round because it was such a great fit that we wanted them on our cap table. But we were their first investment of fund 2.
Wow.
And so they needed time. It's very exciting. But they needed time to do a first close of their fund. So sometimes there's always dynamics at play.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. I love hearing. I'm just so happy they're on your cap table. Yeah.
We are too.
I would love to talk about how you stay emotionally, physically, mentally healthy while, being employee number 3, employee number 5, but now also the CEO and founder of a startup.
I'm glad you asked because it is something that we probably don't talk about enough as a society. I will say, one, having founder friends has really helped. And I'm really, really fortunate for a couple of women who I have become friends with just in the last year or 2, who, show up to all my launch parties, like text me, like, you've got this, trade stories, like, are just really honest and vulnerable about our experiences. A number of them are also parents. I'm not yet, but seeing the parents who are founders is even more incredible, honestly. So having people as a empathetic support system is one. The other thing for me personally, I have to exercise 3 to 4 times a week or I start to go a little bit crazy. I have a fantastic executive coach, Christine Sachs. It sounds like
Yes,
you are.
I know. Yes,
Yes,
yes.
through the coaching world. We actually made her an advisor to the business.
Amazing.
And so I encourage founders to consider that. Sometimes you don't always have the cash, but you do have some equity. And she does meet with myself and my co-founder both one-on-one and together once a month. And
Okay.
I think it's been really, we've never had we've never had a co-founder fight, but we talk through things every month. So we never have a co-founder fight. And so I think that um support system has been important. I also found acupuncture, which has been great for all the, way too many hours behind a desk or in front of my phone. And so, it is finding the right support system. I'm saying the things that I found work for me. That doesn't mean they'll work for everyone, but other day I had sort of an aha moment where I was like, as an operator, if you had asked me, I would have just said exercise. I would have been like, if I exercise a few times a week, I'm good.
Yeah.
As a founder, I'm like, I need 3 legs of the stool. I need to exercise and have my coach and have my acupuncture, and then I'm good and I'm grounded. And so,
Yeah.
knowing that as those pressures increase, you might have to add more to the support system,
Yeah.
and just saying that's okay. It's getting harder. I'm tackling more, the challenges are bigger, the hills are steeper. So let's add to that support system. And then last but certainly not least, my husband is, primary dog parent to our shelter mutt special Lily. I don't recommend having an Australian Shepherd in New York City.
She's so cute though.
She is so cute.
Yes.
But she is a handful. And so having, someone to take care of our dog. And we made the intentional choice not to have a family yet, and that is still part of our plans. But I really admire people who you shared earlier, when you had a company, you had a child in the same year. I actually had to give myself permission to say I would like to have it all in life, but I don't know if I can have it all at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's wise.
So we're doing it. The startup is the baby, and it gets everything and more now. And hopefully there will be a point in my life where there's room for more space. But I think just being intentional about what I can give, to other parts of my life right now, and knowing that it's just it's the season, and it's the season where it's all about good word for me right now.
Yeah. And I just want to talk a little bit more about coaching, because Christine Sachs is amazing. She was the leader of my coaching group a few years, well, I guess 6 years ago. But something that I'm a coach, so I'm biased. But something I find in my coach, because I have a coach because I'm a coach, is it gives me space to get clear on what I want, what my stance is. It's an appointment for me to work through that. When I'm not working with my coach, I don't give myself the same time for reflection. And I do lean on my friends more, which is fine, but they're biased.
Of course.
I'll hold space, right? So it's just, I think that's wonderful. And it's really a great support structure for people who can have the resources for a coach.
Yeah.
I think it's critical for any founder, but I'm biased.
It's a good bias. I learned about executive coaches through Chief. I met many wonderful executive coaches. And Christine and I had developed a relationship many years ago. She did really, she also raised her hand. When I left and started a company, she's like, I want to support you. And so I think if anyone ever raises their hand and offers support, figure out how to, make that happen, because you do need support in all various shapes and sizes. But I genuinely, this is actually one of the hard parts I think about venture is there's such a responsibility to do amazing things with the capital that sometimes you can feel guilty about spending the capital in ways that might feel not, directly impactful to the bottom line.
Yeah. Not revenue generating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, let's spend one more dollar on paid marketing and
Mhm.
see that direct correlation. But one of, when you look at why startups fail, I think a couple of the top reasons: co-founder fighting.
Mhm.
So screen for that up front, but also continue to work on your relationship. It is a partnership. It
Yeah.
is, the joke of like it's like a marriage. It is
Yeah.
for the length of your business. And so you have to continue to invest in that. And invest in what you need. Like it's the put your oxygen mask on thing. It's
Yep.
like if the founder burns out, it- that's not going to go great for the business.
Yep.
And so, obviously don't don't do anything crazy, but um and you are responsible to be a fiduciary to, to your investors, to your company for that capital. But I do think a coach is a really great investment, and I've definitely felt that kind of pay dividends for us, of just having someone who can create the space and help us reflect and help us continue to cultivate and nurture our relationship as the company grows.
Yeah. So what's been really cool about this conversation is that it's really been a lot focused on connections, which is very on brand for you,
Mm-hmm.
and humanity, which is also on brand and part of your work. Do you have any hot takes about the industry right now?
Venture at large
Sure.
or AI.
You tell me.
I have a couple. I do think a lot of people are building AI to disintermediate humans,
Mhm.
and that's a mistake. Um, I love the idea of AI helping to democratize connection or access. And so, for example, a physical therapist, not having to go and put all their notes into a system, it takes 20 minutes of every hour-long appointment. Wonderful. If they could just talk into a thing and that could record their notes and they could spend more time with the patient, I think that is a great use of the technology. I am a little worried about um, humans uh, relying on AI friends
Mhm.
for connection. I
Yeah.
think that's going to contribute to the loneliness epidemic that we're living in. And so, um, again, I think there are ways that AI can supplement or take out some of the, paperwork or the behind the scenes work that help practitioners. But I would caution that I don't think we should forget that, like, the way humans have survived for the whole existence of our species is like in tribes and in community,
Mhm.
and we can't lose that.
Yeah, and I think that the more we try to solve it through technology and even through transactional stuff,
Mhm.
the less authentic it can feel.
I mean, when we talk to people about what they want from Goodword,
Hmm.
the most commonly used word is authentic.
Yeah.
And I think people are really aware. It's like you probably get hundreds of emails a day, and most of them are AI written.
Mhm.
And so we're losing that authenticity as a society. And so that's, I think, the great challenge in front of us is how do we leverage technology to increase authenticity?
Yeah, I love that. Perfect. Well, I really appreciate you coming in today. Everything that we're doing here is to help early stage founders kind of understand what's possible and how to do it.
Hmm.
And so I love you diving into, your career and how you raised your round and talking about Goodword. It's all just so rich. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I hope it helps fellow founders. It is not an easy process, and we had a really, really great outcome. We have some wonderful. I mean, all of our investors are wonderful, from Heather at Human to Leslie at Crown Walker to Jen at January, and more. We have some really great partners, but it takes time and it takes effort to find those partners. And so, what I would say to founders is just keep going. You'll
Yeah.
find them.
And by the way, those three are on my list, my wish list for this podcast. So we'll see if I can make that happen. Let's manifest it.
I can probably make an introduction for you.
See, there we go. There we go. It's the magic at work. I'm Helena Fogarty, and this was Inside the Round.